All right, this is Mr. G here. I'm going to discuss a little something I think that might help uh, some of you in your composition and perhaps even in your understanding a little bit of modes. I have to confess to a certain arrogance when it came to modes. For instance, today's mode, the mode we're going to talk about today, the Dorian mode, it goes D to D with the same key signature as C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And I remember I used to think, well, that's just stupid. It's just a C major scale, but it starts on D. What's the point? Still the C major scale. Well, it's not. Um, old old music theorists used to say that scales are dead and lifeless things, and modes are living and vibrant and exciting. And I used to not know what they were getting at by that. But I think I'm getting a glimpse, and I want to share that with you today. This is a way that what I'm going to show you today is something that has really not only improved my compositional abilities, but has also improved my abilities as a player, especially improvising. I'm starting to learn how to make modes really snap and really sound cool. So we're gonna discuss the very first mode that was on the scene. It's called the Dorian mode. It bears some resemblance to the modern day Dorian mode, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But it it was the very first mode in the scene, and as you're going to see, the way they dealt with modes back in medieval music is different than the way they're doing it now. And I think you'll see that's kind of exciting. All right, so let's get started right at it. Mr. J out. Here's the Dorian mode: D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Same back then as it was now. This is the very first scale that showed up on the musical scene. Now, they didn't have A Dorian, B Dorian, C Dorian. They just had Dorian. It was the first church mode. These were the only notes that were available, more or less. Now, in today's modern modal system, this is a complete Dorian mode. However, in medieval times and medieval music theory and early church music theory, the way you treated the modes was very special. They had two very important notes. First, the most important notes were the tonic, which is this guy and that guy, D, and the dominant, which is A. A is the fifth note, D, E, F, G, A. So tonic, low and high, and dominant. How you approached those two notes is really what gives the Dorian mode its distinctive sound. All right? So let's see if I can move this over to it. There we are. We're going to talk now about approaching the tonic and approaching the dominant. How you approach them is what sets it all up. So let's take a look at it. First of all, here's our tonic. You can approach, in medieval music theory, you approach the tonic from a step above, an E, or from a half step below. Now this necessitated them adding an accidental, because if you remember correctly, back up a second here, in the D Dorian, it's a C natural is what naturally occurs. Well, they said you could have a C sharp. You should approach the final tonic from a step above, E, down to D, or C sharp up to D. Right? So that's one thing to keep in consideration. And we're going to come back to that C sharp. It's going to be very important here in a minute. The other note that was most important in the mode is the dominant, which is an A. Now, as before at the tonic, you approach it from a step above or a half step below. You treat the dominant exactly backwards. You approach the dominant from a full step below, or a G to the A, or from a half step above, B flat down to A. And the reason they did that was that back in the beginning of music theory, they called some intervals perfect, some intervals okay, they called them major, and then some of them were verboten. They really didn't like them. And of these intervals that were disliked, the most disliked one was something that we call today the tritone, a diminished fifth or augmented fourth. The F note in this mode that F is a very integral part of this. It's part of what gives it its minor feel. So you couldn't mess with that F. The note that's a tritone away from the F is the B. So you have F, B, ooh. They called that, I think it was Musica Diabolos, the devil's interval. So they didn't like B. They tended to shy away from B an awful lot. So what they tended to do, especially when coming back, instead of coming from B to A, they would change the B to B flat. So that if an F is occurring in another musical part, the B flat to F, well, that's B flat to F is a fifth. That's okay. That's one of the perfect intervals. So now instead of this, we have this. So we have from a step below the tonic from a step above or a step below. Right? Here is where the big difference between modern approach to modal playing or modes and the ancient approach to modes really has a huge difference. The chords in today's modern Dorian mode are based on the notes of the mode itself, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Well, it's in the key of C, so the same chords that you find in the key of C are here in the D Dorian mode, but in different order. D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major, and then D minor. So we have seven chord choices in today's modern mode to use as our chordal background for our playing that we do. Take a look at this for a minute. Do you remember how when we introduced, let me pull this down here, Dorian mode, and we talked about approaching tonic from a half step below, or the dominant from a half step above. We introduced two new notes into our Dorian mode. And without those two notes, which is pretty much how our modern day Dorian mode is considered, you end up with these chord changes. Let's see here. Let me do this. Get ready. Let's hear that. E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major, and D minor again. Now, those, you can do an awful lot with that. There's a lot of note choices there, chord choices. You got 7 chords you can choose from. But when we add the C sharp and the B flat into the mix, then what we end up with in the church mode, medieval Dorian mode, we end up with these chords. So instead of an E minor, we can now have an E diminished if you swap the B natural for a B flat, because that's one of our notes. The next chord, F major, it has a C in it. If we change that C to a C sharp, because that sometimes is that's an optional note, we can have an F augmented chord. G major, normal in the Dorian, can now become G minor because we can swap the B natural for B flat. A minor can become A major with the C sharp instead of the C natural. B diminished, which is the normal chord in the normal mode, can now become B flat major if you put a B flat in that chord stack instead of B natural. C major, which is in our normal Dorian mode, can now be a C sharp diminished. So we had 7 available chords for us in the Dorian mode, modern Dorian. In the ancient medieval Dorian mode, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 chords available to us. And here's what they sound like. just from the perspective of available choices and note choices and chord choices, can you see how the available chords that are available to us in the medieval church Dorian mode offer us so many more options than the the chords in the today's modern Dorian mode, like you see right there. So when those ancient theorists said that the major scale is a dead and dry and dusty thing, something like that, but that modes are alive and vibrant, I think this is what they meant. We have so many more choices available to us as composers if you think in terms of the church mode. Now, one last thought. The way you make what makes the Dorian mode, the church mode, pop is how you approach the tonic and how you approach the dominant, like we did up here. That C sharp and B flat really come in handy. The B flat to the A is part of what makes the Dorian mode so Dorianish. So it'll be like, and approaching it from a half step below, the tonic, and then approaching the dominant from a step below or half step above. Those notes have as much to do as establishing the sound of the Dorian mode in our ears as anything else. So, I hope this gives you some information and a little bit of insight as to why I am so excited about studying medieval music theory, the church modes, because they are living things. They're amazing. All right, Mr. G out. Bye-bye.